about weathering. Weathering, this is the gradual disintegration of rocks by either physical or chemical processes. Many factors affect weathering. One of such factors is the climate. Now, climatic elements like temperature and rainfall have great influence on weathering. Temperature and water enhances the physical means of weathering, whereas water and other gases in the atmosphere aid the chemical means of weathering. Another factor affecting weathering also is the rock type. Now, different rocks have different mineral compositions. Their mineralogy differs, and as such, some rocks may contain or may contain minerals that are resistant to these weathering agents, and as such, that rock will become resistant to weathering, whereas those which contain minerals which are not resistant to these agents of weathering will not be resistant. So what are we saying? We're saying that due to the mineral composition of rocks, some rocks are highly resistant to weathering, whereas others are not, because different minerals have their different hardness as determined by the Moore hardness scale. Now we have relief as another factor affecting weathering. Now, steep slopes favor weathering, especially in frost action, while gentle and even slopes favor chemical weathering. You know, steep slopes will favor physical weathering because when the slope is steep, running water will easily run fast down the slope, and as it runs down the slope, it interacts with the surface of the rock, and as such, the rock is broken down mechanically or physically. But when the slope is gentle and even, it helps to accumulate water, and this water, with reaction in the association with gases in the atmosphere, will react with the minerals in the rock, leading to chemical breaking down of the rocks. So number 4 factor here which affects weathering is the living organism. Roots of plants also favor physical weathering. Animals also bore holes into rocks and as such break them into smaller pieces. And this hole bored by animals in the rocks can also enhance the agents of chemical weathering. There could be accumulation of water in those holes, and this water in reaction with the minerals and mineral composition or minerals in the rocks will lead to chemical breaking down of the rocks. Let us look also at the processes of weathering. There are 2 main processes. When we talk about process, we're talking about means of weathering. Number 1 is the physical, or what we call mechanical weathering. Number 2 is the chemical weathering. Another, the physical or chemical weathering, there are various agents of physical weathering. One of such agents is temperature change. Now, where rocks are exposed to sun in the day, the outer layer of the rock, of the heated rock, expands faster than the inner layer. So the outer layer of the heated rock will tend to expand faster than the cooler interior layer of the rocks. But at night, as the temperature drops, the outer layer cools more rapidly than the interior layer of the rock. And this alternate expansion and cooling of the rock gives rise to the peeling off of the rock surface. And when this process whereby the rock surface peels off is termed exfoliation. And the pieces of the peeled rocks, are called screeds or tallies. The second agent of physical weathering or mechanical weathering is the alternate wetting and drying. Rocks tend to swell when they absorb water. However, when they dry out, the outer surface of the rock shrinks, and this weakens the rocks. As a result, they begin to crack. Let's also look at the third agent of physical weathering, frost action. Rocks with cracks will collect water or snow inside of them within the cracks, and this water freezes during the winter and melts during the summer when the temperature is high. These processes where the water freezes and melts over time tends to widen the cracks where the water were collected, and as a result of the widening of these cracks, a rock eventually breaks down. And this, however, usually takes place in polar and temperate regions. You can see the diagram here showing frost action. See the water being collected at within the cracks in the rocks, and as they cool or they freeze and melt continuously over time, they tend to expand or widen the cracks, which eventually leads to the breaking down of the rocks. You can see the arrow moving at opposite directions, widening gradually the cracks, which will at the end of the day lead to breaking down of the rocks. Now let's look at another agent of physical weathering, which is action of plants and animals. This is often referred to as biological weathering. As plants grow, their roots penetrate the rocks below, usually along areas of weaknesses like where we have cracks or breakages, and these thus causing the rocks to break apart. Some animals also, like rodents and earthworms, etc., bore holes into the rocks and causing them to crack, and also giving or enhancing chemical weathering. Apart from this, man's activities like mining and construction of roads, etc., also contribute immensely to the physical or mechanical breaking down of rocks. Now let's look at the second process of weathering, which is chemical weathering. Chemical weathering has to do with the gradual disintegration of rocks due to their exposure to air and water. The processes involved in chemical weathering include: 1, we have solution. Now, rainwater attacks and dissolves rock salts to form solution. 2, we have oxidation. The reaction of oxygen in the air or water within minerals or with minerals in the rocks. That's what we call oxidation. Now, C, we have carbonation. Atmospheric carbon dioxide mixes with rainwater to give rise or to form weak carbonic acid. And this acid dissolves the rock, leading to breaking down of the rocks. So let's look at hydration also as one of the processes involved in chemical weathering. Hydration happens when rock minerals absorb water, resulting in chemical alteration of the minerals. Lastly, we have hydrolysis. Hydrolysis has to do with the reaction of water with rock minerals. to produce a totally different rock from the parent rock. When there is a reaction of water with the minerals contained in the rocks, at times there may be a formation of another type of rock that is totally different from the parent rock where the reaction initially took place. So when this happens, hydrolysis has, when this happens, it is called, the process is called hydrolysis. So I want you to take note of this, that weathering is ultimately, or weathering ultimately leads to the formation of soils, and the remains or the weathered materials of the rocks which eventually form the soil is called regolith. Now let's look at mass movement. Mass movement could also be called mass wasting. It has to do with the different ways in which weathered materials like gravels, mud, clays, etc. move down slopes under the influence of gravity. And this movement could be of these rock materials could either be by sliding, by creeping, by falling, or by flowing. Mass movement is also facilitated by water, earthquakes, steep gradients, undercutting of slopes, and biological activities. Now this is a pictorial representation of mass wasting. You can see the electric poles tilting towards the direction of the movement, as well as trees. That is what we call mass movement. Now, factors affecting mass movement. So many factors affect mass wasting. One, we have the slope gradient. The steeper the slope, the faster the movement, and vice versa. We have human activities. Man's activity on the slope could either promote or prevent wasting. In a location where man is